All right, y'all. So I'm going to keep this brief because we are at a very critical time in our lives, in our generation, in 2024, with us, as I've said already, barreling toward a very critical election. So I am honored and excited and grateful to present to you two people in conversation who have been extremely vocal, honest, um, advocates for us as a community, as Black people. And I'm just very excited for them to share what we curated together, this conversation, voting as an act of love. Award-winning actress, producer, and entrepreneur Kerry Washington, and award-winning journalist Jemele Hill. There you go. There you go.
Hey, everybody. Hi, everybody. Okay.
What's up, everyone? Thank you for joining us for this important conversation about voting as an act of self-love and activism too, which the love part is something we have to remember. Now, Kerry, this is not your first election that you've been involved in, and you've always been someone who's been very active in terms of using your voice and your platform. But being that it's October, I have to be honest, I'm pretty scared, right, about the possibilities and the outcome of the election that is less than a month away. But I know that we're here to talk about love. So how do you, but how do you honestly balance that? Is that there's this fear that I think we all fear, or that this fear that we all have, but yet love is, something that has been very much a part of Kamala Harris's campaign. Love, joy, these kind of happier things. So how are you balancing those emotions?
Can I ask a quick question?
Oh yeah, sure.
I want to know, can I just shout out some words on how people are feeling about the election? Anxious. What else?
Petrified.
What was that? In limbo.
Limbo.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure we weren't projecting.
Good job.
I was like, are other people scared? Because sometimes I actually worry that maybe we're not paying enough attention to be scared. Because to be scared means that we're plugged into what's happening around us. And sometimes I think some of us might not be scared enough. But I am also anxious and terrified. But I will say that the thing that helps me the most is to plug into action. That I find that when I am the least scared is when I'm actually participating in the process. And I guess what I mean by that is, I somehow talked the whole Scandal cast into going to Michigan a couple weeks ago. Last week? I don't know. What is time post-COVID? But we were in Michigan, and we were really deeply embedded with groups, grassroots organizations on the ground in Detroit, doing the heavy lifting of democracy building. And when I'm with those communities, when I'm with the folks who are every day knocking on doors and making phone calls and getting folks to sign petitions, it's hard to be in fear because they are living in solution. And they're so filled with hope. And they're having small wins every day, because I think part of our problem, generally speaking, if you don't mind me saying, is that I do think we kind of have fallen into a hero worship culture where we think we're going to vote in one election, we're going to elect some kind of superhero, they're going to swoop in and make everything better. And that is just not how democracy works. I know a lot of us thought, oh, Barack Obama is the first Black president, we good now. We really thought that, but that's not how it works. You can't transform a democracy in 4 years, believe it or not, especially when that president doesn't have the support of Congress. So there's so much more nuance in this, and I think it's really important to remember that it's not just about the presidential election. The presidential election is very, very important, but it's also about all those smaller elections. And even more than that, all the groups on the ground who are really doing the work day in and day out to fight for democracy in their communities. So for me, when I'm doing that work, I feel more hopeful. I feel less afraid.
Um, Thank you for that reminder. And also to reiterate what she said, it's not just, again, not about the presidential election. You have to vote down ballot. So I need everyone out here. If you're not familiar, that's fine. It's like find out who, we know there's a big DA race here in Los Angeles, right? So it's like district attorneys, comptrollers, county commissioners,
Judges,
judges. Oh
sheriffs.
my gosh, like they make major decisions and a lot of them run unopposed because when apathy sets in, they are not challenged and held accountable because we, the people, that's part of our responsibility. I think you mentioned this to me backstage. They actually work for us. And share with them the analogy
Listen,
you
this
gave
is really important to me because, it's about that money, right? So these folks in public office, and I'd just like to remind us, their salaries are paid by our tax dollars. So you are paying them. So if they're out here in these streets making decisions that are not good for you and your family, you are literally paying somebody's salary to not do right by you. You are paying somebody's salary to take care of somebody else. It's like walking up to the gardener and giving him money to pay your neighbor's to mow your neighbor's lawn. If you really want to take care of yourself and your community, the people you love most, we have to participate in voting. And I know that it can be intimidating when you say vote down ballot because there's all these measures and there's these smaller races, but it's worth the Google search. I know how much time some of you spend on like beauty tutorials on YouTube. I know how much time
true crime rabbit holes.
I know how much time some of us spend on our fantasy football leagues. Like, I know how much time we are willing to put online for the things that we care about. So it's like, for me, voting is part of how we care for ourselves and our community in real time because these decisions do impact our lives.
Sis right there said, mind your business, Kerry, because she felt like you was talking about her.
It wasn't an indictment.
But
We love fantasy football in my house too. But
I'm sure in your house.
yeah, in my house,
Yes.
we love real football and fantasy
And
football.
fantasy
Yeah.
football. But as a celebrity, it can get really tricky because there's a lot of sometimes pressure put on celebrities or invalidation because you're a celebrity. They say, "Oh, Kerry Washington, you don't have a right to an opinion because you're this or that. You're rich. You're famous." So, what was it that caused you? I know it's sort of shut up and act.
Yeah.
Just like shut up and dribble, same thing. So, what was it that inspired you to use your platform in this way?
Well, first, listen, I don't show up and talk about voting because I'm an actor. I show up and talk about voting because I'm an American. And I shouldn't have to give up my political voice because of what I do for a living. Because all of us have a right to, that's literally what a democracy is. It's supposed to be by the people, for the people. Supposed to be. And when people tell me that their vote doesn't matter, part of what I say to folks is if your vote didn't matter, they wouldn't be coming for our vote the way they are. They are coming so hard to restrict our voting rights, to make it more difficult for us to vote, specifically as Black folks, younger folks, women. They are enacting all kinds of rules and laws to make it trickier. In Georgia, you're not allowed to hand out food so you have these long lines, and now there's all these kinds of restrictions. Recently in Florida, even with the hurricane, the governor there has refused to extend voting even though people can't get to the polls. So if our votes didn't matter, they would not be attacking our voting rights in the way that they are. Also, if our votes didn't matter, then listen, what's the right way to say this? You say I'm rich and famous. There are
That's the perception,
Sure.
That's the perception.
There are.
You are famous
people,
though. Like,
okay.
you can't get around that. Sorry,
But
I can't give you that one. I ain't in your pockets like that, but I can't give you the famous part.
trying to say, I guess what I want to say is that the people that I know that have a lot more power than I do, and a lot more wealth than I do, they care very deeply about elections. They're in those rooms having those conversations, trying to impact who wins elections because they know how important voting is. And so for us to give up the power that we do have is just like, I want more for us. I want us to know how much we are worth. I want us to know how much we matter. I want us to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and look at the people we love and say, like, I'm gonna show up for you because I love you and I care about what happens in our community. I care about the schools we go to. I care about the jobs we have. I care about the food we eat. I care about how we drive, where we live, whether we have health care, whether our parents are able to have Social Security. I care about the planet. Like, I care about these things. And it's hard to care because sometimes it means we get our hearts broken. But I don't want to be like a 4-year-old kid at the playground who takes my marbles and leaves just because things don't always go my way. Democracy is a game. I got to stay in the game if I want to have a say, if I want to win. And I want us here at the Black Love Summit, I want us to win as a people. And that's not all about voting. Voting is not the entire answer to that. And for us, we've always had a tradition that's like voting and, right? We vote and we march. We vote and we write letters. We vote and we volunteer. But we can't sit out on the voting because it just means we're giving our power to somebody else who does not have our best interests at heart.
So with that being said, yeah. Well, real quick to throw this back on you guys. How many of you all know people who don't vote? Okay, I know people who don't vote. So that brings about an important question. You gave us a little bit of the Newt Rockney, Vince Lombardi speech there, but just to go a little deeper, is that's a football reference for some of y'all don't get it. How do you have a conversation with a non-voter? Like, what's the best approach? Because I can tell you, having had conversations with people on the ground like you have, shame does not work. Just so you know. So what would you suggest in terms of how we have those conversations with our friends, with our family, knowing that they don't vote or don't plan to vote or have a very apathetic, disillusioned view of voting?
Yeah, the shame thing doesn't work. I used to say a lot like, people went to prison in petticoats so we could have this right to vote. But we don't really care. What we care about is the now. And so one of the things that I try to do is to ask people what they care about. Like, what do you actually care about in your community? Because for some people, it'll be taxes or the economy. For some people, it will be education or the planet. Like, people care about different things. For some people, it'll be banned books, freedom of speech, healthcare. Did I say that already? That's on my mind. So I think part of the key is to say, what do you care about? And then sit down with folks and look it up. Like, okay, let's look up the policies together. If what you care about is the economy, let's sit down, let's go to some like trusted sources in the news, and let's look at who the experts say is better for the economy. And not just like, Cousin Bobo on TikTok, but like, let's really go to reputable journalists, reputable economists, reputable environmentalists. Like, let's go to folks who are trained and have a real sense of authority on an issue, and let's see whose plans they resonate with most. Because part of it too is like, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I do want you to do what's best for you. So that I think that's one tactic, because everybody cares about something. Like, do you care about your daughter? Do you care about your daughter having, like right now, I have 2 daughters who have less rights over their body than I had when I was their age. They have less of an ability to make decisions about what they do with their body at 18 and at 10 than I did at 18 and at 10. And that's crazy. That's crazy. And for us especially, listen, this stuff about bodily autonomy, we know in this room. I mean, I talk a lot about how those first 3 words in the Constitution, we the people, means all of us. But to keep it real, when it was written, it didn't mean all of us, right? We the people did not include women. It did not even include young people. I don't know how many people know this. I was shocked to learn that you used to have to be 21 in this country to vote. And it's because students protested and said, you're going to send me off to fight a war at 18 and I can't decide who the president's going to be. So students fought for the right to vote at 18. But we as Black folks, we were 3/5 of a human being in our original Constitution. We were not even a full human being. So when they start to make decisions about our bodies and what we can and cannot do with our bodies, it scares me because it sounds like a time when I had no right to keep the child that belonged to me because I was somebody else's property and my baby was somebody else's property. That was the reality of slavery, that I couldn't make decisions over my body, that Black women are celebrated or unfortunately now given credit for a lot of what we understand about gynecology now, because back then, in times of slavery, there were experiments done on our bodies so that people could understand how a woman's body works. If we don't maintain power over our bodies, we have a danger of going back there. So that's the kind of stuff that's at stake. So when people are like, I'm not thinking about politics, I'm like, politics is thinking about you.
Ooh, say that again.
Politics is for real thinking about you.
And also I want the
I
men.
feel like, you know what Obama's like, don't clap, vote, or what is it? Don't boo,
don't
vote.
vote. Yeah, don't boo,
I'm just
vote.
like, please.
I'm glad you brought that up about the autonomy issue. And I know there are a lot of men in the room, and men think this doesn't involve them, but it does.
Oh, reproductive rights?
Reproductive rights, because think about you, especially if you're a man, head of your family, or obviously a family decision maker, and not just the women in your lives, but there have been some really terrifying cases that have happened where men have lost their wives because of some of the rules in various states, some of the strict abortion laws, because doctors are fearful of being sued or imprisoned because they've tried to criminalize this. So this is not something that just impacts women. It also impacts men too, and the ability to make decisions that are proper for your own family. So
Well,
I
yeah,
want
because
to make sure.
reproductive rights is about having the freedom to start your family when
Correct.
you want to and how you want to. So that impacts men. We're not out here making babies on our own.
Y'all got something to do with that as well. And especially with some of the things they have proposed, which include, if you've heard about Project 2025, pregnancy surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm gonna let y'all go ahead and imagine what that might be like. So with all that being said, you heard a lot of people express some of the emotions, being petrified. You said the word anxious, like, you know,
Bunch of people said anxious.
a bunch of people said
Yeah.
anxious. So with all of that, all of the critical issues, then how do you manage self-care within this spectrum of issues? Like, how do you handle that part of it, knowing the weight of what lies before us in November?
I mean, I think it's really important to breathe and to talk about it. I think to be in community is really helpful for me to be I really do think that volunteering is a way to feel better in this moment. Like we have a month left. And if you haven't done that yet, I really encourage you. Like we just did with a bunch of friends, we did some phone banking for Nevada, which is really easy. They block your number, you call a bunch of people, you ask them what the issues are that they care about, and then they give you a script to kind of what are the ways that the party is going to address the issues that they care about, no matter what the issues are. It's
So
really,
are you like, what's up, this Kerry Washington? Or like, how does that phone call go?
sometimes, and this one I mostly say like, "Hi, my name's Carrie, and I'm volunteering."
So
for
y'all
the-"
know if y'all get a call, hi, my name is Kerry.
But when I knock on doors, it's really fun to see people freak out. We were just in Arizona with a bunch of friends. I love dragging my friends out on the road, especially the friends of mine who are most anxious, because you really do feel better. And I went with a group. It was such a random group. It was me, Jessica Alba, Glenn Close, and Michael Ealy.
And y'all were rolling up on people's houses?
We were in houses. We were in volunteer centers. It was insane. And this one woman was like, "Michael Ealy, you single?" He was like, "No, I'm very married. But if He was like, if I take a picture with you, will you make 30 more calls than you were going to? And she was like, yes.
That's right, blackmail them.
So it's just, I think it's really fun to be out there in community. And especially, California is a really important state in terms of down ballot. We have really important races, congressional, Senate, like we said before, school board, judges. Those races are really important. But we, in terms of the electoral college, in terms of the presidential election, there are states that are much more important than us. So figure out how you can volunteer. Sending postcards is a proven tactic to get people to follow through on voting. So there are places where you can volunteer to write out addresses and mail postcards, phone banking, making calls, but also just having those tough conversations. I'll be honest with you. There are certain people in my family that I'm like, I don't know how to have this conversation. So I'm gonna talk to a million other voters, try to make up for it.
Make up for what's happening in your
Those
family.
but that's what's, the research all says that the most important person to move the needle for somebody on voting is a close friend or family member. It doesn't matter what Kerry Washington says. It doesn't matter whatever celebrity. We're fine. We're carrying a message. But really the person that matters most is you all. So even when we go to these places, like it's actually more important for me to go to the volunteer banks and cheer on the volunteers to be able to do more, because they can impact their community members better than I can. But I can encourage them to keep going. Like when we were in Arizona, it's 108 degrees. And these community members are spending hours knocking on doors trying to protect democracy because they understand the stakes. They understand what we're up against.
You have two daughters. So
I
what?
do. 2 daughters and a son.
2 daughters and a son.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So what, sort of legacy of activism are you trying to impart to your children?
2 years ago, it was the midterm elections, and I was going to Michigan again. And my daughter was like, she's 10 now, but she was 8. She was like, where are you going? And I was like, oh, I'm going to Michigan to talk to voters. And she was like, you love the voters more than me. Why are you leaving?
Please tell me she said it that dramatically.
She did.
Oh,
I don't know where she gets
acting already in it.
And I said, no, I am actually doing this for you. I am doing this because there are elections happening in Michigan, in Congress, that will impact the rights that you have, maybe for the rest of your life. Because when we're talking about the Supreme Court, we're talking about lifetime appointments. And so I'm actually leaving you for this one night in Michigan. I wasn't going for a week. For this one night in Michigan, because I want you to have as much freedom as you can have in your life. And you should not have fewer rights than I had at your age. I can't let that be.
And glad you brought up the Supreme Court justices, because for those who don't know, there are 2 potential retirements that could happen in the next court, which means I know. Like I'm trying to uplift everybody, which means that once again, how this court is shaped right now is a majority conservative court, so it potentially could be an overwhelming conservative court. So it's just something else. Another motivating factor for why you should vote and encourage other people to vote, because we've seen already some of the historical rulings this court has made that will impact us for generations. So just want to make sure that I throw that out there. A lot of times politicians and activists and those on the ground, they talk about having an election plan. Like, what's your voting plan? So what is your voting plan, and where will you be election night?
So it is really important to have a voting plan. The research says if we have like anything, if we plan it ahead, even like our outfit for the next day, if we plan it ahead, we're more likely to actually follow through. So have a voting plan. Encourage the people you love to have a voting plan. I vote early by mail here in California, but voting has already opened in California. You can already start voting here. So vote here, get it out the way, and then go volunteer. I think on election night, I will probably just be at home because I have kids who are at school here in LA. So I won't be like hiding under a rug, because I might be hiding under a rug, but I'll have to get up in the morning. I don't think we'll have a decision the next day. So I want to prepare everybody for that. It's going to take some more time. So be patient. I don't usually watch the coverage as it unfolds because my anxiety cannot handle that. But my husband usually does. He's usually at the computer refreshing and watching the news, and so I watch his face, and then I leave the room, and then I come back and I watch his face. But yeah, I think that's where I'll be. 4 years ago, my kids will tell you that when I say, like, what happened when the morning that we found out that Biden won, and they'll tell you we had ice cream for breakfast. Because I was like, whatever you want, do whatever you want, kids, do whatever you want.
Man, I'd have hated to see if it went another direction, what they might have been eating. I mean, like, you get nothing and you like it.
But let me say this too, because as I was talking about Biden, and we talk about kind of the shift in enthusiasm that's happened since Biden has stepped aside, I also want to say this, because I'll be transparent, I know Kamala Harris very well. She's somebody that I've known for a long time. I do truly believe in her and think that she is going to be a fantastic president. You don't have to agree with me. You actually don't have to be in love with these candidates. I know that we are at the Black Love Summit, but part of what I want you to know is that this isn't about loving a candidate. It's about loving yourself and your community enough to vote on the values.
Give us that soundbite, Kerry. Give it to us.
Because you're not going to be in love with every candidate, but you don't have to be. They're not sleeping in your bed. They're not like at your Christmas dinner. They're making decisions about policies that impact your life. So don't let's not worry about whether like somebody's got a cool vibe or not. No. That's not what I'm looking for in a president. I want a president who's going to make decisions that are best for me and my community. And right now, the other guy, so there is this misconception that he's better on the economy. He has filed for bankruptcy multiple times. He's not good on his own checkbook. He's certainly not what's right for the checkbook of this country and this world. And I know that you will hear people say, thank you for bringing up Project 2025 earlier. There will be people who say to you, he said he hasn't read it. He said Project 2025 isn't his. I believe him that he hasn't read it.
I was gonna say that part is true. It's 900 pages.
Not
no
sure
way.
what he's read.
They basically had to give him a coloring book when he was in the White House, so it didn't matter.
But the people who wrote Project 2025 are his people. They are former members of his administration. They are his senior advisors. They are the people who are telling him what to do and how to do it, and they will be part of the next administration if he is, God forbid, elected. So do not believe when he tries to distance himself from the very evil policies that he has put forward in Project 2025.
Which is why I mentioned the pregnancy surveillance. I mean, there are things in this that are truly terrifying. I haven't read through all 900 pages, but I've gotten through a good bit of it, and it's really frightening stuff. And so don't depend on the idea of like, oh yeah, I don't think he'll be able to do this. Do understand that the guardrails that he had the first time he was president are no longer there. And he has the Supreme Court that is in his back pocket. So this is going to look much differently than it did from 2016 to 2020 if he is elected. I want to briefly, before we wrap up soon here, is talk about your time on the ground. And you talked about it so affectionately and how energizing it was. A lot of us are on social media. And so I think, especially if we're on Elon Musk's Twitter, that sometimes you get to thinking the worst of your fellow citizens because it's kind of a hellscape on that site. But I just want to know, like, when you're on the ground talking to like real people, and not the activists, but like the people who are voters, what is your sense that you get from them? What are they sharing with you that has kind of stayed with you?
I think that people just want to be free. like want to be able to live a life that they envision for themselves that is without terror and strain. And I feel like just too many of us are working too hard just to survive. And I think that people don't want to live that way. People want to be able to live in joy. And
Does the country feel as divided when you're out that it does sometimes when we're a little more
that I
removed?
don't know. I'm not sure. I do want to say, I think this is what came to mind when you asked that question. I think sometimes as Black people, we don't want to engage in politics because it's painful sometimes. I think it's hard to, like, we were talking about this a little bit backstage, like, it's hard to know that we are working as hard as we are working to beat that guy, and it's so close. Like, it brings up all that stuff about how we have to be twice as good to get half as much, right? Like, how extraordinary do we have to be? And that's their best? That's what they're bringing forward as the best possibility? So I think sometimes politics can be hard because, hear me out, I think sometimes we want to think that we are past it, that like the fight for civil rights belonged to a different generation and that we're good. And I think sometimes it is heartbreaking to know that we still have to be doing this fight. But we're not going to be more free, more successful, or more happy by pretending that we are not in this fight. We are in this fight. They are coming for our rights, whether we want to feel that reality or not. So to me, even though it's a hard truth, I would rather be in the hard truth of the struggle than put my head in the sand and suffer and watch the people that I love suffer. And that's what will happen. I know, like, as hard as it is in community, like when I talk to folks who are doing the work on the ground, they know that as hard as it may be, it will be so much harder if we don't elect officials that at least will hear us out. You know, even on the difficult stuff like Gaza, I know Gaza is a tremendously difficult topic. And I know people that want to sit out because of Gaza. Do you think that Trump is going to be a better president on Gaza? Do we think that we'll be able to protest and be heard on Gaza with Trump in the White House? The last time there were protesters outside the White House when Trump was in office, they were tear gassed. So at least, even if you don't agree entirely with the policies of one administration, the Harris Waltz ticket believes in free speech, in the right to protest. They want to have an ear to the people. They may not do everything that we want, but we'll still have a voice. We'll hold them accountable and we'll push. And I want to explain one other thing. When these parties, like when the Democratic Party is deciding who to care about, who should we call? What doors should we knock on? What they do is they look at a list of likely voters. They look at the people who they are going to be accountable to, who are the people who have voted before. Now, this is a problem, right? Because that doesn't include first-time voters. It doesn't include a lot of us, because we vote every once in a while, right? But so what that means is we are not a priority to the party if we don't vote. If we don't vote, we make ourselves invisible, because who they care about is they care about pleasing the people who show up day in and day out to vote. So again, not only are you paying the gardener to mow somebody else's lawn, but you have turned down the volume on your voice when you don't vote. You are literally sending a message that says, don't worry about me. Make whatever policies you want. My family, they don't matter. My kids, do whatever you want. It's like sending your spouse to the grocery store and saying, whatever you want, I don't care what we eat. Get whatever you want. I don't do that. Maybe some of you do that. I don't do that.
And
God knows what Namdi would
I'm
come home with.
saying, we know men in the grocery store, that's y'all kryptonite.
So I just want to say, like, the way that these systems work are very deep. It's a commitment to participate in democracy, but it matters. To me, there's like a level of democratic health. The way you go to the gym, you go to the dentist, you work out, you get your hair done, vote. It's just part of how we take care of ourselves. It has to be.
Now, I don't know if you noticed, but you said some very important things that are tied to love, commitment, right? You talked about the fact that it requires sacrifice. We know love requires sacrifice. A lot of y'all in relationships, and so you understand that that every day is not a sunny day. But the days that matter more are the days where you make the willing choice to love somebody and love the person next to you. And that is essentially what love is. So voting and love are very much tied to that. And especially as Black people, I mean, we're the patriots. When you think about how much we as a people have loved this country with no guarantee of our own agency, no guarantee of our own rights, and we're still fighting for this place anyway. We're fighting for the soul of this entire nation, and we always have. That's been our legacy, despite how we have been treated by this very country. The reason sometimes there's resistance to when we are outspoken about our rights is because we remind this country to live up to the brochure. And that is love. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Miss Kerry, for everything you've said. Like she said, have a plan, vote, and after you vote, go volunteer.
Please.